All right, folks, welcome back to another edition of this year's summer series. And have we got a great guest for you today? We are talking to a self-confessed, enthusiastic amateur who was in $30,000 worth of debt and now has built a $2.78 million property portfolio. Ben, what else do we cover?
Well, Bryce, we explore this whole idea of material poor, but experience rich. And I really like where that's going in terms of teaching people about good money behavior. So it's a ripper of a show.
It's a ripper. We get out of debt using the debt snowball, folks. Lots to cover. Let's rip into the show.
Welcome to the Property Couch, where each week you get to listen to two of Australia's leading experts. Bryce Holdaway, co-host of Location Australia on Foxtel's Lifestyle Channel, co-host of Escape from the City on the ABC, and partner of Empower Wealth Advisory. Ben Kingsley, chair of Property Investors Council of Australia and the founder of Empower Wealth Advisory, named the 2018 and 2019 Property Advisory Firm of the Year. Stay tuned as they bring you the insider's guide to property, finance, and money management.
All right, folks, welcome back to the Property Couch podcast. And today we've got a very special guest. We are talking to TPC listener James Crabtree. Welcome to the Property Couch, James.
Thank you, Bryce. Hello, Ben.
G'day, how you going?
Not too bad. Very sunny here in Perth, which is nice.
Very good.
Mate, I've actually got my parents over from Perth at the moment, and we're sitting at the breakfast table this morning, and she looks out the window and she says, "Oh, looks like it's going to be a really great day here in," because I live in Torquay. "Looks like it's going to be a really great day here in Torquay." And I said, "Mum, do not bring your West Australian paradigm over here, because if you're in Perth, you look out the window in the morning, you can dress for the whole day based on what you see." But I said, "Not here. Four seasons in one day," and about an hour later, the blue sky disappeared and it was raining. So there you go. But,
check the weather up over east. Perth, you nearly don't need to do that. You know it's that southwesterly is going to come in at 3 o'clock, and you know it's going to be 30 degrees every day.
Oh, the nostalgia of Perth weather, Ben. I could stay here for hours. But welcome to the Property Couch, mate. We're excited to chat to you, not just because you're a West Australian, but because you've got a really great story to share. But let's find out a little bit about you, about the conversations, money, growing up. What were the influences? Did your parents talk to you? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so growing up, we moved around a lot as a family. So I've got 3 other siblings. I'm the number 3. So a little bit of the forgotten one, I reckon, the number 3. When you're in a family of 4, you've got to do something to try to make a name for yourself or get some attention from the parents. But no, it was. I had a really good upbringing. My mum and dad were great. We were probably. We moved. My dad was an agronomist, so we moved around a lot. Started in Perth to Esperance, then we moved to Canada, and then we sort of finished up in Northam until we finally made our way back as a family to Perth. So that was challenging and exciting all at the same time. And it was. I wouldn't say we were a wealthy family. We were probably materialistic poor, but experience rich, because we got to see different parts of the world, and dad's job allowed us to move around and see different places. But from a money, chatting around the dinner table, there definitely was. There was conversations about it. We sort of knew we didn't have a heap of money, and a lot of the time we'd go to different parks, and I still remember my heart breaking when Dad would say, "All right, well, stay in the car, kids. I'm just gonna go see how much it costs to be able to go to this water slide park or something else." And he would come back and go, "Sorry, kids, it's just a little bit too expensive. We're not going to be able to go." And I still remember that to this day. So that must have really affected me. But it sort of showed me that you don't get everything that you ask for. Which in hindsight has been a great lesson for me. And we do a lot of $2 chores, they were called. So walking the dog, mowing the lawn, cleaning the bathrooms, the toilets. So you had to earn your pocket money. You weren't given anything. So that happened 2 or 3 times a week. You had to do your chores. And if you wanted more money, it meant you had to do more jobs. So then that turned into... I reckon Mum did a good job with delegating, because by the time I was 10 and my little brother was 7, we were all having one night a week having to cook for the family. So she got to bring her cooking days down to only 2 or 3, which was pretty smart by her.
Very clever, very clever. Now, that I catch that your dad What was he? Was he a
An
rocks?
agronomist.
Yeah,
Yeah.
is that the study of rocks?
No, so a study of so he's a scientist, but a study of agriculture. So he'll
Agriculture.
help
Right.
farmers work out what type of crop they should be putting in the ground, and yeah,
That's right.
So what is it? An agronomist?
Agronomist. Yeah.
agronomist. So he
Okay.
essentially, the reason we ended up in Canada was he swapped jobs with another agronomist. Australia, actually. But Brandon was the town that we were living in, and 7,000 people. So to have these Australians rock up to a 7,000 person Canadian town was a big deal.
Yeah, I bet. What an
I've got to
experience.
lean into materialistic poor, experience rich. I love that, and I love the awareness that you have around that. Can you talk to that now? If that was to be flipped, would you feel like you maybe missed out a little bit? Because a lot of what we talk about on the podcast is to really lean into the experiences and realize that the happiness isn't in the materialism. You've got a lived experience around that.
Yeah, I think back to, I guess, my favourite memories, and they were, it would be raining, pouring down rain in winter, and Dad said, "All right, get in the car, everyone. We're pumping up some old tyres, and we're chucking them in the river, in the Avon River, and we're going to just float down the river for the next couple of hours and grab a couple paddles if you can." So things like that, where then we spent half the day there, and again, that's one of my favourite memories growing up. All four of us kids, and Mum saying, "Oh, I don't know if you should be doing this, darling." But yeah, those types of things. I look back at kicking the footy with my dad, and those types of activities that didn't cost much, but they were sort of the highlight of my childhood.
Now, in terms of the money exchange of ideas and so forth, you gave us some clues around, certain sort of budgeting that was happening, but was it broadly discussed around the table, or was it more of we'll ask and then the parents will do the sums and then we'll be, no, we didn't get, or we did get?
Yeah, much more the latter. And I think Mum, to her credit, she was a lot more structured, whereas my dad was more impulsive. I'll give you an example of that. We were driving through the Rockies when we were obviously in Canada in the summer break, and we were doing some camping. And Dad had been in control of the finances up until this point. So I only know this now because I get to have adult conversations with my parents, which is great. But at the time, obviously unaware and oblivious. But we were supposed to have dinner that night. We were supposed to eat somewhere, but we were on the road, so it was going to be takeout. But Dad came back and said, "All right, kids, for dinner, we're all going to share this big 6-litre ice cream." We went, "You beauty, how good is this?" And then I remember there was an argument between Mum and Dad at that stage. But anyway, what had actually happened was Dad was in control of the finances. That was all the money. That was all he could afford to buy that was in the account. So we actually couldn't afford dinner that. So they were obviously redlining and really taking it to the limit. So after that, that was the changing point when Mum took control of the finances from then on.
And what was her secret formula? Was it spend less than you earn?
Yeah, hers very much, very, very sort of budget orientated.
Yeah.
But much exactly that. Work hard, you earn your money, you save your money, and then you get your stuff. You don't get to be putting it on credit or lay buying anything.
And where do you think your dad went wrong with the like, was it just spontaneous purchasing, or like, he would budget on something essential like food, But ultimately, if there was a big shiny thing over there for his work or something, or a new car, where did it go amiss?
Well, I think he grew up in a very very working class. I'd say lower socioeconomic family that were just trying to survive. A family of 11.
Oh,
So
okay,
he
so
was
it
number
was a big
10.
family. Yeah.
So and they did it. It was quite tough for them. So I think he never had it taught to him from his mum and dad. And I think when he had money, looking back, it was just, this is great. I've never had this. Let's enjoy it with the family. And this is an experience I never got to have. So I think it more stemmed from, he was just never really taught.
Yep, yeah, makes sense. So mum takes over. She provides some structure. It's budgeted. We're spending more than we earn. So, what does that mean for you in terms of observation wise? How old are you roughly when mum's taking the reins?
Yes, I was 7 at this stage.
So from 7 till leaving home, you were observing mum looking after the home economics from that point.
Yeah, I was, and she was very sort of risk adverse, whereas my dad, as I said, sort of a little bit more impulsive. But that also meant that he got to start his own agronomy business, and I got to sort of see when things went well. The family would be able to do more experiences and do things, and then when things didn't go as well for the business and things pulled back, that things got very tight, and it was very much. We'd sort of go back into that very budget mindset from my mum. So yeah, it was sort of fascinating seeing both of them work together. But credit to them, obviously quite different personality-wise and risk tolerances, but we're always sort of talking about it from the same front. So they were always sort of, you could never work mum against dad or dad against mum. They were always batting for the same team, I guess, if that makes sense.
It does, and can I just make a point there? What you also got exposed to with your dad was he was able to be creative with low cost experiences that offered high value. So kicking the footy, low cost, high value time. Time with your parent. That's a big one. And then the other example of that is grabbing an old tire tube and rolling down a river. Like, you didn't pay an admission fee to get on the river, and I'm sure the tire tube was relatively cheap and a couple of paddles. Mm-hmm. So I think, that's another example of just being creative. I mean,
don't forget the ice cream and 6 spoons, Ben. That's awesome. My wife would shoot me.
That's true as well. So no, definitely. I mean, I think what we sometimes lose sight of is that the expectation is to please our kids these days. They've got to have the best devices, and they've got to have the latest games, and as opposed to the stuff which brought a lot of cheap memories and good thrills, which were potentially just get on your bike, go down the park, do something.
Create your own entertainment. Yeah,
correct.
Use your imagination. My mum said a really good line. I recently got married. Just fast forwarding for a second. And my dad and my mum went up and both spoke at the same together. And mum said it was 20 years of hard labour, but then it's a lifetime of wonderful adult friendship. And I've got a lot of friends that have got little kids, and they're sort of going through hard times, trying to work out sleeping, and there was a few people that really resonated with because I was a pretty hard kid, and having 4 kids running around, kicking footies, breaking windows. We had a lot of energy in our house. WWE, we were always wrestling each other as well. So so I thought that I thought Mum really summed that up really well.
So you mean there's light at the end of the tunnel for us? Have kids in their early teens? Oh, thank God for that.
There is.
You mean they do eventually learn how to put the seat down, up, turn lights on, turn lights off?
We eventually get there, Bryce and Ben. So hopefully it's only another 8 or so years before you're able to relax and life gets a little bit more calming.
I hope so.
Your mum's clearly a woman of wisdom, mate. So you don't drop that sort of nuggets of gold without sort of having lots of contemplative thought. So I haven't thought about it that way. I kind of been banking on 18 years of hard labour because I said to my wife, we've only got 8 years to go. But it now sounds like that your mum's probably nudged me to say I've still got a decade to go because my youngest is 10. But the lifetime of wonderful adult friendship, I really like that perspective. So you then get to some form of independence, mate, whether it's at 20 or 21 or 18, whatever it is. Can you tell us what the money management looked like for you when you got your first job? Because you've had this contrast from mum going, all right, here's the structure, and your dad with the impulse, and you've seen some of the fruits of that impulse around his business that you just described. So what sort of money identity do you take on as you start to have your first taste of independence?
Yeah, I initially I wanted to. My dream was to be an AFL player, but I wasn't good enough. I had a few mates that got to go and get drafted, and it was awesome watching them on the TV. And a few of them had really good careers, but I wasn't good enough. So I all of a sudden at 18, 19 had to go. Oh, okay. What am I going to do with my life? I thought I was always just going to be an AFL footballer, and that would be the end. So then I went, okay, well, I love sport, so I'll go out and become a phys ed teacher. So went to uni and worked at a football club as going around and helping do football clinics at schools for young kids for different disabled programs, which was awesome fun, and I absolutely loved that. And then while I was at uni, I realised, it's pretty expensive petrol, pretty expensive buying food at uni. I'm going to need to do a little bit more. So I started throwing uni parties. And so that was sort of the second job. So I was trying to. I certainly was not saving at this stage. I was just surviving and socialising. That was really good fun until I was about to graduate, and just realised that I loved events and really enjoyed the organising and the marketing and I guess the social dynamics of how do you make a good event, and why is there a bad event, and how do you sell tickets, and why do these ones succeed and whatnot. So sort of kept doing that, and it ended up deciding to go down that route at that stage of my life, rather than even though my friends always joke around, because a few of them are teachers, great teachers, but they call me practically a teacher, because I did all my prac and was ready to go, and then never ended up using it.
So you've taken this pivot in your journey in terms of doing event management. Tell us a bit about what sort of happened there, and obviously how did you manage the money story once you started sort of running these events?
Yeah, so money management wasn't great, to be honest with you, originally, and especially now that it wasn't just my finances. It was it was turning into a business that we ended up. I ended up buying a bar and turned into like a live music Triple J bar, and I was just making it up as I went along. I had no idea what I was doing. I couldn't believe that once you employed more than 10 people, you got payroll tax. And why am I getting taxed if I'm actually creating jobs and giving money? I now get another tax on top of that, and then BAS was a whole other thing, and I certainly wasn't saving for BAS, and so it was just it was a year of just working things out and really having no idea what I was doing, but certainly learning some big lessons along the way.
Mate, there's so many things in that, phys ed to events to background of having parties at uni, and then of course I'll just buy a bar and winging it. But so okay, so how does this lean into where did the stability start to kick in here, right? So did the events business did that running by the seat of the pants continue? Did you get some sort of some measurement about you? I think you pivoted to another career, right?
Yeah, so I was doing events and had the bar, and then well, this is sort of where I just got too arrogant, and I just got ahead of myself. Thought that anything I would do would work. So then I was doing the bar with a business partner, and he could see that it was going well, and he had a full-time job in construction at the time, so he wanted to be venue managing just like me. So we ended up buying a rundown restaurant and doing it up as this Spanish tapas restaurant, which it sounded great and the plans were good, but then turns out running a bar and running a restaurant are two very different businesses. And I had to
Where's
learn
the
that.
restaurant?
What was that?
Where was the restaurant?
It was in the CBD, so in Shafto Lane. So it was sort of a place where people would go for a coffee in the morning from 6 a.m. through to 11 p.m. at night. There'd be people going in there for a cocktail, but it was very much food based. And I realised people, when they're walking into a bar, they're happy to take a couple minutes as you're standing behind the bar, and then you'll eventually get someone and you order your beer and you're happy. As long as the beer's okay and it's cold and you've got enough head on it, that's all that matters. Whereas a restaurant, you've got 7 or 8 points of contact, and if you stuff up one of them, you're getting a bad review. And then if you get enough bad reviews, people are going to stop going to your business. So learnt that the hard way. Rents were going up at that stage as well, and just did not manage that, and did not foresee how many extra costs there were in a restaurant versus a bar. So anyone listening that runs a restaurant and has been doing it for a long time, making a profit, I've got huge kudos to you, because that is one of the hardest business models to make work. And you're working so hard. You have, as the owner, you've got to be the one that's keeping on top of it, making sure the staff are doing the right thing for the customers. It's a hard business model.
Yeah, definitely. And when everyone's having a good time is when you got to be working, because that's the main business for you.
So to answer your question, that was the moment. So made money on the bar and then lost money on the restaurant, and then ended up selling both of those businesses just because I was just super stressed, overworked. Was opening the restaurant up at 6 a.m. and then a lot of the time, would be closing at 11 p.m. and around I went and wasn't going forward. So that was a really tough point in my life, and I had to work out, well, what do I do from here? I thought, I could do a hospitality and events, but it hasn't worked for me. So I thought I was going to be, an AFL player, and that didn't work for me either. So what am I good at? There was a lot of self-doubt at that point in my life, and I would have spent a few months sort of just reflecting and just trying to think, well, what do I need to be better at? Why have some of these things not worked? And what I worked out with from the business side is I just didn't manage the finances and didn't do the proper planning and do the proper budgeting before I then jumped into the businesses. I had a mentor of mine who said, well, why don't you get into mortgage broking? You've got to be good with people. You're good at math. You're just not good at good at planning and budgeting. So that would probably be something you'd be good at, provided you got the right training and you did enough work around that. And you can have a mentor that can show you all these things. So I ended up following his advice, not because I thought I would absolutely love mortgage broking. I thought that it would be a really stable job and something that I could build, and it wouldn't have that volatility of a cool restaurant and then it's no longer a cool restaurant, or it's an awesome bar that everyone's going to and then a bar around the corner then opens up. So I just knew that I needed to get better with my money management, my finances, and it ended up being I'm really proud of myself for doing it. I ended up doing it for 7 years because I got to open up the hood of all these friends of mine. Some were doing awesome, some were doing not so awesome, but some looked like they were doing awesome on Instagram. And then I got to have a look at their savings and their leverage with this, and then they've got finance on the car and they're just surviving. Whereas these other friends of mine that had never really spoken about them doing well, and their Instagram certainly didn't look flashy, and they're the ones with the biggest amount of wealth and all these savings, and they're about to buy an investment property. So that was probably the biggest light bulb moment for me. I went, that's who I want to be, and yeah, not the other one.
There's a bit of gold in that. Thank you for sharing that, James. No more Insta envy. Just move into focusing on the silent ones who are getting the job done behind the scenes. So let's just paint a picture here. So how old were you when you started broking? Was it around sort of 26? And what was your financial position like at that time?
Yeah, so it would have been around 26, and I was negative 30 grand at that stage. So I was technically I was
Insolvent.
bankrupt as a business. I was insolvent. Yeah. So that's why things were pretty tough as well. It was I've gone
30K as a 26-year-old feels like 200 grand, doesn't it?
It felt like such a weight on my shoulders, and because, as you guys know, finance broking, you don't just start and then all these clients then just come in.
Yeah.
it's such a long grind, and people need to trust you. And that if they're having a conversation with you, they're probably not buying for another 6 months or 9 months. So I'm having all these conversations with close friends to begin with, because who else is going to trust someone starting out in a job other than your close friends and family? So I went, okay, well, this is definitely what I should be doing, and I want to do it, and I think I'll be good at it, and I'll be able to help my close friends and family. But I'm not going to get paid for probably 6 or 9 months, because I didn't go on it wasn't a wage. I was very much, paycheck to paycheck as your commissions come
Commission
in.
only. Yeah.
So I went, I'm going to have to do something to try to clear this $30,000. So I started just doing. I had like 4 jobs at the time. I moved into a boarding house out at Wesley College, and that was an awesome community to get around, and that meant that I could live for free, I could eat for free, and I just took care of the boys at night time, made sure they were going to bed and that sort of thing, taking them on a few excursions, coaching the footy team, just got involved in a lot of things there. I'd be DJing down at the Windsor Hotel on a Sunday. So I was just doing anything just to be able to survive and just to start paying down that debt. And that was when I came across your podcast. So one of my good friends, Jared, he sent me through your podcast in 2016. And it honestly changed my life, boys, because at that stage, I hadn't learned that much yet in mortgage broking. And it was like every Thursday I'd listen to your podcast, and I just was building more and more on my knowledge. And I think it was Bryce, you mentioned about debt snowball. And that was when I was in 30K of debt. And I went, yeah, okay. So I looked into it a little bit more and decided to do the small debts first, just because I think more, psychologically for me, felt like I could be, ticking things off rather than going for the biggest debt, even though that wasn't the highest interest rate. So eventually, knocked that debt off from just doing whatever I could, and slowly started to build up a savings account. And by the time that I would have been buying an off-the-plan apartment, I'd listened to enough content from you boys. I still drive past this apartment complex that I can see today, and I think of you guys every time I do, because I would have bought an off-the-plan apartment in an okay suburb, but certainly it wouldn't have done what the property.
What suburb would it have been?
In Vic Park, East Vic Park, so beautiful area around there, but it certainly doesn't have anything unique about it, and there's more apartments.
There's plenty out there. Mate, my first investment property was in Vic Park, so fellow Perth boys. So if you're driving down Canning Highway and you go across the causeway towards the casino, just before you cross there on the right-hand side, there's this really large complex, and that's where I bought. Hey, there's a few things that we need to really lean in on there. A couple of things. If people were looking at you and they were seeing that you're at Wesley and you're coaching the footy club and you were DJing down at the Windsor Hotel, is that the South Perth Windsor Hotel?
It is, yeah.
So you're down at the Windsor Hotel in South Perth, and if you started posting Instagram shots, your life would have looked pretty good. Your highlights reel would have looked pretty good, I would have thought. But if people can get behind the scenes, So I really wanted to sort of lean into that, what you were saying before about as a mortgage broker, you saw these Instagram lifestyles that weren't making sense on paper, but it's a really useful reinforcing point for people that are listening to this, because things aren't always as they seem. Jim Rohn said that things aren't always as they seem. And I think if people can really get that to land, because here you are with the look of everything's going okay, and yet you were $30,000 in debt. So that's one thing. Two, debt snowball versus debt avalanche. If you go to Make Money Simple Again, our book, we talk about debt avalanche, which is actually pay off the most expensive debt first, whereas the debt snowball is pay off the smallest debt first, irrespective of cost, so you have some wins. And it's interesting to see how people tackle that, because the debt avalanche is actually the statistically smartest thing to do, right? But the debt snowball actually plays into human psychology, and I think that's the reason why it works, because we've talked a lot about it being 20% science and 80% behavior. The science of reducing your debt says you should do debt avalanche, but the behavior side of the debt says that a lot of people get more benefit out of doing debt snowball. And so that's interesting that you do that. And I thought it's worth leaning in, because some people will be listening to them going, what are those terms? They are different ways of tackling debt. And the path that you chose is a spreadsheet would spit out an answer and say you've taken the wrong path. But the fact that you actually did it and you gamed your psychology and your behavior around reducing that debt is something that's really good. So, mate, how did it feel to get to the end of that snowball's run down the mountain, all of a sudden you've paid it off? What did that feeling feel like?
Yeah, it just gave me confidence in myself, really, to be able to, if I can achieve this, then what's next? And I was probably lacking a bit of confidence. I was lacking confidence after things didn't work out business wise for me. So it gave me the chance to then reset and go, okay, now I've done this. What's my next goal? What do I want to move to? And I started believing in myself that I can do whatever the next goal is going to be. I'm going to be able to do it.
So it wasn't an off the plan apartment. So what was it then?
Well, it was saving more. It wasn't doing. Yeah, I didn't have enough money yet to be able to buy an asset that you guys talk about a lot of the time. Something unique, own occupy appeal, something with good land content in a good suburb that other people are going to want to be upgrading into later on in life, and around a good amenity. So, yeah, I just kept saving, and it just got me in a much better mindset. So I think just from the other probably thing outside of paying down the debt was a lot of your mindset minute things that you talk about, Bryce. That probably led me. It did lead me down a path of self-development and starting to look for other podcasts. I think it was Jamin. Was that the guy that spoke about he was a pastor, and he said, it's very much, Ben, what you love to talk about. If it is to be, it's up to me. He worked out that he doesn't want to be putting it in someone else's control. He wants to take control of his own life and his actions, and rather than relying on God or on family. And that really struck me. I remember walking around Hillary's boat harbour listening to that episode, and that episode was the one that I went, okay, I'm going to get into more self-development. But I'm not great at sitting down and reading, but I do love to walk and run, or even swim, get podcasts as I'm swimming now. And that just taught me so much from just, all these different podcasts I won't go into. But that just got me as a person in a much better space. And it was funny, then I ended up meeting my now wife once I was in a really good headspace and a really good financial space as well.
Mate, there's so much to like about that story. I think Jim Rohn is one of my favourites, and he talks about the person you become is more important than the amount of money that you accumulate on the way to becoming that person. So it sounds like you've prepped yourself in a way that allows you to have all these really cool things come into your life. Can you tell us a little bit about the spruikers that you were exposed to when you were a mortgage broker?
Yeah. So again, I had no idea what spruikers were, but and I was just at the time starting out the mortgage broking business, and any lead was a good lead, and I was just trying to put food on the table at that stage, and yeah, was certainly learning it as I went, and would ask my mentor questions, but it wasn't like every single hour he was able to answer all my questions. So I was very much sort of having to work a lot of things out myself, which is why your podcast was so good. And realised I can't remember what episode it was, but when it was talking about spruikers and you went into a little bit more depth about it, I realised, shit, I'm actually working with two spruikers here. What do I do? So I finished off there might have been one or two deals in the pipeline that I'd committed to, and then as hard as it was at that stage, because I wasn't earning much money, I said sorry guys, I'm not going to be able to take your leads on anymore, which they weren't super impressed about, just because I knew that now that I knew this information, that this is not going to be giving people the greatest results in the future. I'm not going to be able to sleep well at night. So,
were you independent and that company was working alongside you, or were you the mortgage broker for that company?
No, I was the mortgage broker, and they were a separate company that had. I can't remember how they got in contact with me, but they had been sending me the most amount of leads out of anyone that I was working with at that stage. So that was.
Mate, that's incredible. Like the presence of mind to be able to do that, because I think Charlie Munger, I wrote this down yesterday, see if I can find it. Charlie Munger says that people will ignore all sorts of facts if their paycheck depends on it. So let that land. And so, but you weren't prepared to ignore those facts, even though your paycheck did depend on it, mate. So that's actually a rare event that you were able to navigate. And how did you find other ways to be able to do your craft if you weren't taking the leads from the spruikers?
Because it was the business certainly wasn't booming, and as you guys know, in 2017, 2018, the Perth market was not doing much either.
No.
When I'm looking at valuations for clients that are wanting to buy an investment property, there's no equity there for them to be able to purchase another investment property, or if they're looking to move and sell, they're in negative equity. So it was a lot of meetings, a lot of driving around, and this is before digitalization of the mortgage broking industry. So it was just a lot of kilometers and a lot of dollars spent for really, building up a great network, but a lot of people that couldn't actually do anything. So that's when I started doing events on the side to be able to keep earning enough so then I could keep saving. So I went back to my original passion, which I absolutely loved. And originally just did it because I knew that I'd get the mortgage broking business to a stage where that would be able to, pay for everything and provide a good life. But I just knew at that point in time, it wasn't going to be able to pay for enough. And I didn't have a home that I was living in at that stage. So I was still living at Wesley. So I started doing events, just on Saturday nights and Sundays, and then started doing some summer beach festivals and other bits and pieces just around the mortgage broking 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, to be able to keep that savings increasing and keep moving forward rather than sort of staying stationary.
Interesting. So, sorry, Ben, just on that. So can we, have you heard us talk about enthusiastic amateur?
I have.
I think there's an opportunity here on your lived experience. Enthusiastic amateur, right? Because you before you understood what a spruiker was, you were helping people into these leads enthusiastically, saying, "Well, this is a good thing," until you knew otherwise. So, I think it's a reasonable point to lean in on. An enthusiastic amateur still has integrity. Their heart's still in the right place for the client. You're trying to deliver the best service. But the fact that you are an amateur, even though it's enthusiastic, still means that the clients can still be getting the wrong outcome. Are you happy if I was to label you, because I've been an enthusiastic amateur plenty of times over the journey? Can you identify with that?
Absolutely. And I mean, not only that, it was still, even though I said no to the pushed away the spruikers, I was still doing some investment loans. And looking back now that I know the correct structure on how to do that, I was doing those investment loans, not in, cross collateralizing and those types of things, which at the time, that's what I was advised, by a BDM of that bank, because that means they're going to, keep more clients and more revenue. So I was definitely, you can definitely label that for me, because I was very enthusiastic, but I was definitely an amateur. And I reckon it probably took, nearly over 3 years before I started to really understand structures, correctly from an investment point of view.
So, James, I think you make a really important point. Like in our business, we have an academy program for exactly that purpose. I mean, we're playing with people's lives here, right? We're getting finance for them, debt structures, trying to make sure we make every post a winner, because what we try and do is eliminate the mistakes. And so, that 2 to 3 year program that it took for you to sort of get a grasp of strategy first, and then tactics second, and then execution third, so that plan to become what you plan to become piece is really important when you're in a professional advisory role. So the fact that you became eventually, you obviously got to that sort of, investment savvy broker, and you're able to do all of that sort of work. And you're obviously quite successful at it, because, you were able to then start to pivot your journey. So you get rid of your debt. And that's probably a really nice little segue into telling us about the property investment journey, and what you've been able to fantastically create on the back of, those past experiences. And you're someone who wants to touch the pot to see if it really is hot. Oh, yes, it is hot. You'll try and learn, walk a mile, see a mile type approach. So take us into the journey of, right, you're now thinking about money in a different way. You're thinking about how money can make money for you. You've got an events business on the side there. And in a lot of cases, a lot of people make their wealth through business. And usually investing more into your business, whether it be capital or time, can potentially extrapolate that. But you were smart enough to also identify that there's passive investment opportunities there as well. And, you realize that you could potentially do that through property. So take us through that learning process that you went through to sort of.
Changing. And I say this on behalf of everyone that's a listener that isn't going to go on the show and is too nervous and doesn't want to share their story or too busy. Thank you both, gents, for the amount of content that you've put out and the amount of change that you have done in the Perth and Australian property market, because you've changed so many people's lives with the free content you put out, and I'm sure your business is successful because of the ethics that you two gents have. But there's so many people that, like me, haven't used your services but have used your knowledge and all your teachings and gone out and put it in practice to better my life, but better everyone else's life that's also used that same knowledge. So I just wanted to say thank you first of all, boys.
No worries, James. Appreciate that. Look, thanks for the compliment. Take us through the sequencing. So you now know that property is a game of finance, as much as it is obviously the execution on location selection and then asset selection on top of that. So, what frameworks, what processes did you use to get your financing in order, and then what type of asset strategy did you decide on based on your cash flows?
Yeah, so it was a joint decision, because I now had my partner. I hadn't proposed at this stage, but I knew that I was going to propose, and she was the one, which made life so much more better, and made me way more content. And it was it's an awesome thing when yeah, you're then doing it as a team, and it's not just me listening to podcasts, and I can actually riff it with my partner. She's she's from the UK, so she was only supposed to be here for 3 months, and 6 years later, she's still here. But we had a lot of battles about what we were going to buy, because we knew we wanted to buy we'd love to have a family in the future, so we knew that we wanted to buy our family home to begin with before we looked at buying an investment property. And we had the savings there ready to go, and we were looking actually in Vic Park for these nice cottage houses that we thought would be really good. And then we were looking in other suburbs. We actually spent 4 or 5 months every weekend. We'd cycle around together of a different suburb that we were interested in buying in, just to get a real feel for all the streets. And we had so many arguments. A few times, Harriet just cycled back to the car when she'd had enough. Because I was pushing very much for more the cheaper end, and she was very much pushing for the more expensive end. And her argument was, well, I haven't decided to live in Perth to live away from the ocean. So why can't we just buy in Cottesloe? I said,
so let's set the scene for anyone who's not from Perth, mate. Yeah. How does Cottesloe rank as a beachside suburb?
It would probably be the number one beachside suburb in Perth. So, you're looking at 4 mil, 5 mil properties, and that's not even the ones with the ocean views. But and I was very much trying to go southeast, go further and further away from the city where prices were really good, still within that anyway. So we had all these arguments, and we ended up coming to a middle ground and deciding on Scarborough, because Scarborough hadn't gone through much growth at that stage, and you had these suburbs all around it. Trigg is a beautiful suburb, and again quite a wealthy suburb. And then you go south, and then you've got City Beach. So again, two fantastic coastal suburbs. But then Scarborough, it's sort of a bit of a mixture of apartments, and it's a real energy, and I absolutely love it. But it was still quite affordable when we were looking. So we started looking for property there, because you can walk to the beach. It's a bit hard with public transport, but you can still drive 15 minutes to the city. You've got all these bars and cafes and restaurants that you can walk to. They just finished this big redevelopment of the foreshore, so it's amazing. It sort of went from a very much like a party spot to very family friendly, and then Sunday come 9 p.m. it's certainly a party spot down on that foreshore. But yeah, it looked like a great spot to bring up a family. So we were sort of sold on that because we could afford it, and it wasn't stretching us too much. And then it was just coming down to, we know the suburb, now we need to work out what we can actually afford with our money. And that was when the COVID then hit, and we were looking at buying existing, but then we wanted to buy something big enough so then Harriet's family, when they come over to stay with us from the UK, that they could stay with us too. I wasn't super keen on sharing the TV with my AFL on the TV, and having her dad with the EPL on. So I thought, well, it'd be great to get a granny flat if possible, with their own living area.
That's a nice way to say you'd like separation, mate.
So we ended up, so we were going to buy existing, and then I started hearing whispers in the industry about a building grant that was going to be, that was potentially going to be getting announced. And then I heard, actually, you guys mentioned it as well on your podcast, that there was going to be stimulus going to kickstart, the construction industry, because the pipeline was falling off a cliff. So I pivoted because prices were still actually going at a reasonable price, and it was, and they certainly weren't dropping during that period in Scarborough. So we pivoted and spoke about, well, how about we build? There's a block of land that's in the perfect spot that we'd love to live in. We're in an okay rental situation at the moment, and then we can build this house and then have this granny flat attached. So we went put an offer on land before anything got announced publicly from a grant perspective. And because I was in the finance industry, I knew our income and we were first home buyers. So I thought, if they're going to give out grants, they're going to be giving it out surely to first home buyers under this certain income threshold. And so we had enough money to be able to finance it ourselves anyway without it, but it was a good low hanging fruit that would just really help our LVR if we were to be able to get that. So then we pulled the trigger quite quickly with a really long settlement. So then we could then engage a builder to get all the designs and everything done up. So we had our plans ready to go by the time our block had settled, and we got to submit that straight away. And then by that stage, everyone had their the grants that were out, and then everyone was fighting over all the land in Perth.
Well, Scarborough's a very established suburb. So did you buy infill land? Did someone subdivide? How did you get the land?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, so we're the back block of initially a 800 square metre block.
Gotcha. Makes
Beautiful.
sense. All right. So you built this house, and how did the building challenges impact you building over in Perth when the prices of everything was going? Did you escape that, or were you in the thick of that?
We were like, it was like we were surfing on white water, and we saw this tsunami that was just chasing us, and we were just like one step ahead of where the trade seemed to be all getting cluttered up and jobs were sort of stopping. So at every stage we sort of just avoided where all the shortfall in materials came or the trades came. So we were super lucky. And we certainly didn't complain about any little bits and pieces. The builder didn't quite get perfectly by completion time because understood that they probably didn't make too much of a margin on our house. So we were just stoked to be able to get in. And there was a couple of minor delays, but they did a really good job considering what the whole building industry was going through.
So you get your first one down, James. Now, obviously that's been a good result. You timed it well. Land values have appreciated. Now Perth, as we're recording this, is the hottest market in the country. Tell us, so what year was that? That was
2020.
Okay, so that's 2020. And now you sort of fast-tracked or accelerated your planning because there's more properties to come. So take us to that next part of the story.
Yeah, so at that stage, we knew we wanted to buy an investment property, and it was our finances allowed us to be able to, and cash flow allowed us that we knew we could pull the trigger on something that was worthwhile, and following all the rules that I've learned from both of you gents. And it was just as interest rates, there was a lot of noise around interest rates. So Perth had been pretty hot, like all of Australia, and then all of a sudden, everyone was talking about interest rates are about to rise. So things just sort of dropped off all of a sudden in Perth, and I went, "Oh, this is probably the moment to pull the trigger," because we can afford, if interest rates do go up to 5 or 6 or 7%. Provided we get the right asset. And so we ended up going to Home Open, and there was a fair few people there, but no one ended up putting an offer on. So we ended up getting that at a pretty good price. And again, same sort of thing in the suburb of Bayswater, beautiful suburb near the river, not too far away from the CBD, about 15 minutes from the CBD. It was also going through a lot of redevelopment at that stage because it was essentially a construction site because the Metronet is building all these, as you gents would know, building all these new train stations, connecting Perth a lot better, which is really great policy, by the way. It's looking fantastic now. And so I just thought, in a year's time, this is going to be an awesome place to live. But right now, it absolutely sucks because of all the work that's going on. And looked at the plans, and there's all these cafes that are going to be going on underneath the Bayswater train station, and only 2 stops from the airport. And so we ended up pulling the trigger on a property, a nice sort of cottage that 1930s build, but had recently sort of been redone with a whole roof and whatnot. And it also had a granny flat out the back, actually. So I saw that as if interest rates do really rise a fair bit, then there's potential to be able to get 2 lots of income rather than one. So that was sort of even though it is a bit closer to the train line than I'd probably like. So you do hear the noise. That was the thing that was making me decide whether it was a good decision or not. But like one of your podcasts, I think you said you're never going to get the perfect property. There's always going to be an 8 out of 10 or something like that. So there's always going to be something that, you're going to have to accept isn't quite perfect. So
if you're planning to hold that property for a long time too, the density of the Perth suburbs will get such that, the culture in Perth isn't a massive train culture like it is on the East Coast, although that's definitely increased. But the more and more density that Perth gets, the more and more you're going to be thankful that you're in a suburb with the train, and that'll probably become less. But talk to us about Harriet, right? So you've compromised from Cottesloe to Scarborough, which was well played by you. And for those, it's the suburb with the only high rise on the west coast of Australia that Alan Bond somehow got through council back in the 80s.
Observation City, is it? The old classic Observation
Was
City?
Observation City.
Is
it still Rendezvous now?
There, went back in the day.
Yeah. So how he did that, we'll never know.
I think I do know. I think there was a brown paper bag involved.
A lot of brown paper bags. Yeah. So clearly that was for you to live in. You mentioned Harriet was UK origins. If she's not putting podcasts in her ears, are you having to have these conversations with her about investing, or was she just fully on board to go, yep, Bayswater's the trick? And then I guess the third part of that is, did you cycle around Bayswater as well together?
Did cycle around Bayswater, but we've had many conversations about it. Some went well, some didn't go well, and that's why I love her. She stands her ground and she challenges me. And if I don't have the right answers or the right numbers, she goes, "Oh well, not good enough. You come
back to work,
back to the drawing board."
Yeah. She certainly wasn't just sort of sitting along the ride and just backing me in with whatever. She knew that I love learning about property, and it is a safe investment. The UK, she's seen what the UK market has done for her parents, so she understands that that's a good place to put your money. But she certainly needed a few months of discussions and going back and forth before she was comfortable enough to support pulling the trigger on an investment property. And once I sort of had to show the numbers, show the type of property, and how that wouldn't too negatively impact our life.
And then so that's number 2, but we're not done yet. There's still one more, sort of dance on the dance card there. So tell us about how much confidence you got out of having that first investment property. Did it rent easy? How have your tenants been? Because usually if you have a good experience, then normally you can continue to rinse and repeat, right? So tell us about, sort of what it's been like to then make that final step about the third purchase.
Yeah, well, funnily enough, it has been generally pretty easy, but I think the hot water went after a month in, and then there was something else that was another $2,000 bill or $3,000 bill that I had contingencies in there, but I wasn't expecting to have to use them straight away. So that was a bit painful, but overall the tenants have been great. We didn't get any uplift in price though, because that's when that run really then started with the RBA and lifting rates. So that was so I was sort of looking and going, it is an extra bit of a headache, and you do have to be engaged and manage things, and it's not all rainbows and butterflies. But I knew that long term that it was the right call, and because it's very much it was a construction site, for a lot of last year and early this year. I guess it didn't surprise me that much that prices didn't really move during that period, and we're in it for the long haul anyway. So I just knew that worry about that in 20 years time, and then and then so we got to the next property. Again, it probably needed 2 months of back and forth discussions with my wonderful wife Harriet, and I've tried to get her onto the podcast. She just tried to make her listen to it, but she's just not that interested, unfortunately.
Likes the dollar value. I'm sure she'll like the portfolio value, but whether she's liking the effort required, yep.
So we were driving back from down south from someone's wedding, and I had your podcast on because I was driving, so I was allowed to choose what we were listening to. And this was in February of this year, and I knew we'd already had the conversations about, where my business I'd finished mortgage broking by this stage because my events company had some really successful couple years. So we had some funds to be able to put into something, and I wanted to make sure it wasn't into a new car or into a boat or something. I knew I wanted to put that into property. So we'd sort of already had that conversation, but we hadn't decided that now was the time to pull the trigger until February came along, and I'm playing your podcast, and she's having to listen to it begrudgingly, and you guys started talking about Perth, and I knew that I look at numbers, and I'm now a nerd with this sort of thing, so I knew it was looking good, but with you guys in my ears for 6-7 years, it sort of just gave me that last push of confidence to go, yeah, it is a good time to pull the trigger, because when this cash rate does start to drop, whenever that is, the Perth market supply is just, we're not building enough homes, and there's so many people coming in. So, that was the final push I sort of needed to. And then, the next week we were looking at a property that had been on the market for 30-something days, and no one had put an offer in. And it was, it has owner occupier appeal once it has a little bit of a reno. It needs a bit of love, whereas all the beautifully renovated homes in this suburb were going for, well above. So we ended up pulling the trigger on that one with tenants in there, and it's got subdivision potential, and we'll look to do that at some point in the future. But at this stage, that one's just a hold, and we'll worry about that later.
So 3 properties north of the river, mate. The original conversation was you wanted to be in the south, so clearly Harriet's had an influence on location, which is nice. So there's a couple of if people haven't got the sense from the last bit of the conversation we have that you're going to be successful, James, based on your resilience and your ability to keep getting back up and taking action. One thing you just said a second ago is the biggest clue you've left in this entire podcast about your future, your current and future success. You said, I'll worry about that in 20 years' time. When someone starts talking about time horizons that are in decades, that is the very clue that gives us the full appreciation of where you will take this property portfolio. Because the people who have too short a time horizon are usually the ones who get influenced by external noise and all of the things that are happening. But you're going, my time horizon's so long that, okay, we've got some fluctuations in interest rates now. You're starting to already think about what's going to happen when interest rates come down. That's a cyclical thing, and that's a time horizon thing. So that's incredible that you see it that way. So you now have a portfolio of properties on the north side of Perth in really great suburbs. So in the backstory, you were happy to disclose what that portfolio looks like. Are you comfortable sort of talking to what you've built that to now?
Yes. Well, actually, off the top of my head, I actually can't remember the exact numbers. So I did the numbers when I sent you guys an email thanking you for the podcast. You could share it, Bryce, but I actually can't. I don't know it off the top of my head.
So you built the portfolio to be 2.78 million, having started in 2020 you're 33, 34?
Yeah, 33.
So what do you say to your generation who says it's not possible to buy properties at your age because of property prices are unaffordable?
Well, I think especially in Perth, I don't think it's only really excuses, because it just means you might have to get a second job for a bit of time to build up that savings account. And there's still properties that I still look at realestate.com, even though, we're capped out for probably the next few years. So I'm going to have to sit on my hands, which is okay. But there's still some good properties out there and prices compared to your Melbournes and your Brisbanes, and you're not that far away from the CBD. So I know the market's really hot right now, but it is still affordable, especially here in Perth. So yeah, I think my advice would probably be, just do whatever you have to do to get that savings up to be able to pull the trigger. And if you're lucky enough to be able to have parents that can help you out, you don't have to get that second job maybe. So lucky you. But if you don't have parents that are able to help you out, like us, then you're going to have to do it yourself. And if you end up doing it yourself, the pride you're going to feel of doing it yourself is something really awesome. So I'd really recommend people just grit their teeth and go make it for themselves.
And how have you been feeling about the rising interest rate environment? Like, as those interest rates have been, sort of accelerating at pretty much a fairly aggressive clip, has that sort of worried you at all, or what sort of mechanisms or behaviours or thinking have you done around that?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously not ideal, but I don't think anyone other than people with money and savings right now are enjoying the interest rates going up. But yeah, we've put into contingencies, and I've worked our cash flows off. If the rates end up getting into 7% territory, then we're all good. And hopefully they don't get into the 8%. But if they do, I'll get a second job. I'll get a third job to make it work.
Mate, you just start a bar or start an ice cream restaurant somewhere down at Scarborough where it automatically comes with 6 spoons, mate. You'll be able to make that work. Hey, as we work towards wrapping this up, mate, we asked the series in summer series was all about what money means to you. So you've given us some terms here: lifestyle choices, spend time with your family, travel, being able to provide for your family, and security. You've given us a hint about the when you were growing up being experience rich. What do those things actually mean to you if you tried to land the plane? What sort of lifestyle choices do you want? What sort of family time are you actually chasing? What are the travel experiences that are really important to you? And I'd be really keen to understand what does security actually mean to you?
Well, security means not just security for me, but also, my siblings, my parents. So that's probably my next goal is not only getting my wife and I and our future. Hopefully we've got some kids in our life's plan, but also taking care of them if they need the help. My parents are very giving people. And yeah, that's probably next on my goal is to make sure that they have an awesome retirement, and money is not a thing that's going to need to be worried about. And yeah, I mean, my dream goal is to be able to take all our siblings and family, big extended family and parents, on holidays and enjoy places overseas all together. I love my snowboarding because we lived in Canada. That was where I sort of got introduced to the snow. So I'd love to, even make an annual big family holiday that I could maybe help out some of my family members to be able to get over there every year. So that's probably a bit of a North Star at the moment that I'm focusing on. But I guess from a security point of view, it's I always knew I didn't want to have to worry about money. And I guess the next challenge is going to be, if and when Harry and I have kids, still, I guess, giving them enough grit and not being handed things. They've got to go earn it for themselves, but still give them a great life. So I'm sure that'll be the next challenge when we do have kids, and how to make sure that they don't just get handouts, but they get to have the same satisfaction as what Harriet and I have in life with doing it ourselves.
Well, James, you've done it in the right order. You've sort of started to build and accumulate a wealth base There will be a pause, I suspect, as you start to have kids and that cash flow impact. And so, but at the end of the day, you've got the power of compounding behind you. And so as those kids get older and you start thinking and looking into the future around those sort of 5-year, 10-year and those decade periods, that's where you'll fulfill the lifestyle choices that you'll be able to generate. And second to that, the time with family, that will start to show up more and more. So as the debt to value ratio starts to change around and these properties become more cash flow reliant on rent and less on you, that's the story that will take place, and eventually you'll land the debt plane and you'll be able to build off that passive income. So it just takes the pressure off. I mean, I think there's still too many people out there who we're seeing who are partnering up and having or starting a family before they have their home asset behind them, even let alone any type of appreciating asset behind them. And that's just going to really challenge them in those lifestyle choices and also, put them on the back foot. And so you're a perfect example of, putting it in the right sequential order and, getting on, taking action. So credit to you, to Harriet. Well done to both of you. Obviously Bryce and I just love hearing stories like yours. We could have kept talking all day because, you're making a meaningful contribution to society. You're also getting on with, you're living your best life. And I don't think there's much more you can really do other than that, and you've taken life's lessons along the way and you've also experienced a little bit of 2 steps back to go 3 steps forward. So, but you've shown that grit to get out the other side. So congratulations to you. And I look forward to basically seeing where you take this journey.
Thanks, Ben. Really appreciate it, mate.
Well, James, my last question is probably just a lean in on what Ben was just saying there. It was around why did you come on to the summer series? What is it? What's the message that you want to land? Because I think you've dropped a whole bunch of wisdom nuggets all throughout this conversation that, we didn't talk about property in this for the whole part of this conversation. We talked about resilience and getting back up on your feet and trying new things and backing yourself in. There's a whole bunch of lessons that I'm glad we've got from this conversation with you, as well as the property stuff. But why did you say yes? Why did you want to come on?
I was on my honeymoon, actually, and we were playing a card game called The Imperfects. So if anyone wants to play a great game with their partner and find out some vulnerable things and really gets conversations going, I really recommend you go get those cards because, we after dinner every night, we'd play that game and, got to really find out even more about each other, which was great. And we've even done it with my nana, myself and Harriet, which again, spoke to my nana for a lot of years, and there was a lot of things that I didn't know, which that sort of prompted some great answers from her. But one of the cards, the reason for that story was it popped out, and it was the question to me: who would you like to thank in your life that's made a big impact on you that you haven't before? And my answer was both of you men. So Harriet said, well, you should write them an email. And I said, I should actually thank them. And then time went by and, work got busy again and I didn't do it. And then I heard you a couple of weeks ago about jumping on the if this is the thing that needs to push you to come on the show. I thought, all right, I'm gonna do it. This is my chance to say thank you. So that's the reason that I'm most likely not going to use your services, boys, because I like to do things myself and I like to learn myself. And but I wanted to you're the reason that I'm in this position because without your guidance and giving out this free content, there might have been a spruiker that would have sold me something and I'd be in a completely different financial position. And that's going to affect not only Harriet, but that's going to affect my whole family. So that was the reason I wanted to come on to say thank you. But, if there's a 25-year-old out there that is in 30K debt right now, just work hard and there's a way out, and it's not going to it cannot take as long as you might think it's going to be to get yourself out of that hole, to get yourself in a good financial position where you're not having to worry about paying the bills and keeping things at bay.
Mate, that last bit's awesome. You've been really generous with your feedback to Ben and I today, so thank you for that. But that last bit there is the point, right? If someone is in a position that they don't have to be 25, but you've said 25, but if you're in a position where you're starting from what seems like a bit of a mountain in debt, you're the living, breathing example of someone who can actually get out of that. And I think that, for me, that's the bomb here. That's the wisdom bomb amongst a whole bunch of clues that you've left throughout this conversation. So, mate, I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I think one of the things is there is no doubt, to your point there about not using our services, that is totally fine. There is no doubt that this podcast has been a very incredible way for Ben and I to speak to a group of people who love the things that we love, but they end up going in two lanes. They end up being in the do-it-yourself lane, or they end up being they want it done for them. And we're just as pleased. And I know this sounds a little bit platitudey and it's hard to verify, but we just get a lot of joy out of getting the emails, out of getting the social media mentions where someone's actually done something, and there's no commercial relationship with us because we know that the action threshold for most people is so incredibly high. Anything you can do to actually lower that action threshold to get someone to actually put one step in front of the other and do something. And even to your story is some of the bits in the past didn't work, but you still kept getting back up. So I think we will never get sick of that. And before we close out, Ben, is there something you want to add to that?
No, I mean, you're a perfect example of taking action. And sometimes those actions can be learning experiences. I've always believed try to plan as much as you can, but some people just rush at things, and that's fine too, right? So as long as you're having a go, but what you've also shown is that resilience, that sort of thinking around, okay, I'm in debt. I love the story about going to basically live in the boarding house, look after the boys, and then that's free board, right? You've worked out free board and free food, and it's like, and I get paid to also show them around a little, like just things like that. Not now. I mean, every boarding house across Victoria and Australia is now going to get door knocked about sort of wanting to come and coach their footy team. Look, you brought a set of assets and skills to the table, but you've been able to work. I mean, when you did the university and you did teaching, you've looked at the skills that you've got and you've put them to work. And that hasn't been just from a PAYG or working as a teacher. You've actually done different ways of putting those skill sets to work. So I'm sure if anyone's thinking about this in our community, about just look at your skill sets. What do I bring to the table? What am I really good at? And then start to think about that as an idea of how can I monetize that to allow me to, get back on my feet. And make no mistake, it's going to require effort. I mean, you were working 6 a.m. till 11 plus the commute. So you're doing, 80-hour weeks. And I mean, that has been a theme right throughout summer series. And if I'm honest, if you actually listen to every winter series or summer series season that we've done, there is no substitute for hard work. There's no substitute for putting the effort in to get the reward. I don't know, it's all I tell my kids, work before play and basically, put in the effort, you'll get the reward. That's as simple as it gets. I mean, if you just bring those attitudes to the table that ultimately reward for effort and then, sort of make sure you celebrate those wins along the way. And that's it. You don't need anything fancy around that. They're the formulas, taking action and doing those things simply and effectively. If you've got that drive, you're halfway home.
Yeah, James, every self-made millionaire is self-made. And so what you've demonstrated is you didn't get given resources, you just use your resourcefulness to get yourself in that position. So, mate, you're on a wonderful trajectory. I feel privileged to have been a part player in that. Mate, on behalf of everyone here on the Property Couch, mate, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Bryce. Thanks, Ben.
Thanks, James. Well done.
Gee whiz, that was a good chat, Ben. I don't know if I loved it because he was an articulate, well-considered, intelligent man, or if just he's a Perth boy, Ben. But clearly there was class all over that conversation.
Very much so. And what we've got, I've got some notes here about, we've got a lifetime learner. And we've also got someone who's not afraid to have a go and do things. And I think, obviously with Harriet, sort of challenging him around, before we take action, let's see if we can think this through. I think that's the right chemistry that's going to result in some really great outcomes. So, and I said it at the start of the show, but I also love this idea of experience as being low cost. So it doesn't cost much to, grab a floaty and float down a river. It doesn't cost much to get out in the park and, play a game or create a game or do whatever. You don't have to have really expensive costs to have great experiences. So I think that there's a great message in there for all families, especially, given obviously the cost of living pressures that we're currently seeing around the place. So, I mean, I could go on, but I think I should give you a go.
Well, no, wonderful insights from someone who is I said it before, but just articulate, has thought through some of the challenges that he's faced. And I said it at the top end, but I really love the opportunity for our community to understand the concept of an enthusiastic amateur. You and I have talked about that, but you just got to see someone who genuinely thought they were doing the right thing as a mortgage broker. And now on reflection looks back and goes, maybe I probably would have done it a bit differently. But in the moment, at the time, James could put his hand on his heart and say, I thought I was doing exactly what I should have been doing for the best outcome for these clients. So, there's two lanes of people getting advice that is less than optimal. One is intentional deception, and the other one is enthusiastic amateurs not knowing that it's not the right path for you to take. So I thought that was a wonderful way for our community to see how that plays out in reality.
I agree. And, we've got some themes that have also been running through the summer series about hard work. And he was working super hard in running the restaurants and the bars and all of those things. But, there ultimately wasn't, he wasn't getting anywhere. So realizing, coming out of that with $30,000 worth of debt, and potentially being, overconfident maybe in respects of, how hard could it be? I run a bar, surely I can run a restaurant. But then having that really tough decision, because a lot of times people are in work or they're striving for something and they're just not getting those rewards as well. So, making that tough decision once you've got all that sunk cost bias in the effort that you've done and trying to turn it around. So, the definition of stupidity sometimes is, keep doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. Now, I'm not saying for any stretch that James has done that, but what I am saying is you got to say to yourself when enough is enough sometimes. Is this, and the same with, owning property or doing whatever you're doing. You got to make sure that you're playing the long game, but if the game doesn't look like it's in your favor, you've also got to start thinking about, how you're going to consider the next move in the game. And that's what we saw with James and Harriet, a complete reset, a rethink, a reinvention in a way in terms of becoming a broker. And then the saving story, going to, train the footy club, but get free board, basically looking after the dormitory. So just clever ways. And so where there's a will, Bryce, there is a way forward.
Yeah, and just another timely example that it's not how many times you get knocked down, it's how many times you get back up, right? It sounds like a platitude. It sounds like something that you put on a sticker on the back of your car, but it's actually true. It's how many times you get back up and you keep facing it. And here we go. He's got a very successful property portfolio as a result of hard work and just continually applying and having a very supportive partner who not only says, hey, I'm supporting you in the game that you want to play here, which is the game of long-term property investing, but make sure you're sharp on your numbers before you bring it to me, because if you're not, you're going to have to circle back and sharpen the pencil and make sure you got those numbers around. I like that he cycled around in suburbs, and they did that as a couple to get familiar with the suburb. That's a wonderful takeaway there. And one of the pieces of language that I want everyone to take away from this episode, Ben, as we start really fresh and strong in our second week here in 2024, is he said, I'll worry about that in 20 years' time. Beautiful. I mean, if you or I ever hear someone talking about time horizons that says, I'll worry about that in 20 years' time, oh my gosh, that is probably the number one determinant of the person's success. Because if they say, I'll worry about that in a couple of weeks or a couple of months or next year, whatever, sure, they might be okay. But when they say 20 years' time, far out. So just a really good example of using resourcefulness when you don't have a lot of resources. So,
And
mate,
that's
I
as
thoroughly
long
enjoyed that chat.
and that's as long as they don't say, I'll worry about passive income and my retirement in 20 years' time. That's the only time you can't use that.
Got to take action first, Ben. You've got to take action first. That's the caveat. Good pick up by you. As long as you've taken action,
Action
and then you
first.
say, I'll worry about that in 20 years. Beautiful. Very, very good fine tune there. That's why we work, mate. Well, mate, yin and yang. So, mate, a couple of things. Last year,
Yes.
you and I gave away some free gifts on this podcast around some of the research that we're really proud of. So we've got something brewing. We've got we've huddled, you, me, and Stiggy. We've done a little huddle late last year, and we're trying to be able to be in a position, probably in early Feb, Ben, to be in a position to give away some more opportunities for people to get some more free gifts around suburb data.
Yeah, I mean, we've got two things really coming up. I mean, I'm excited at the end of the summer series to be announcing something pretty significant. So building on the My Financials release in more at late November of last year, we've now got obviously a platform that has really, a supercharged engine in it. And we're going to be adding some insights and some other exciting things to announce shortly on that. But then we're also going to pivot. Like we do every February, we start putting our attention back on the property side of things. So we move away from the money management. Okay, January is about, the month that we're in right now is about organising your finances, planning a year ahead, trapping that surplus, and then starting to think about, well, how do I make that money work harder for me? Well, obviously, we're biased in terms of property is the way in which we like to be looking at that. So we'll be talking more in February around what the outlook looks like, but also providing you with some really nice, rich resources and sort of insights in the property space as well. So stay tuned for that.
Definitely stay tuned for that, folks. And folks, it's the second week of January. We need to be double downing on making sure that you know your detail around your numbers. So if you go to moorr.com.au, you go and fill in your details. There's money stretch, there's money fit, there's financial cards. You can see your details in a very quick snapshot, but it also sets you up because we're getting close to the couple more to go, Ben, for summer series. But it's at this point of every year I say, if you've been enjoying these stories, right, they are everyday people who have pretty much said, I listened to what you guys said, I put it in action, and then I decided to worry about anything that I need to worry about in 20 years' time. So I just want to put the call out to anyone who's listening who's been inspired by these stories. I'm coming back for you. I want you to be a part of our summer series at the end of 2024 because we love sharing these stories.
Yeah, it's an ideal time to set up your money smarts, January, start of the year. And remember, you can get free access to the book, Make Money Simple Again. And that's effectively the instruction manual for setting up your money smarts. So that's thinking about your money for the entire year. And then obviously your 7-day float so we don't get that slippage and we get discipline and build habits around that as well. So lots of opportunity there to improve. And all we can do is provide the opportunity for you to take action. And we hope you do.
So just to summarize what Ben said there, your 2024 resources list is this. Go to makemoneysimpleagain.com.au. You can get a free book there, which is the instruction manual. Then you go to more.com.au, and that's MOOR.com.au. And then if you want to have your North Star in mind, you go to thearmchairguide.com.au, and you can get a free copy of our book. Ben, if you just pay for postage, we'll send it out to you. So you can get the book that helps you trap surplus. You get the platform that actually helps you do it super fast. And then once you've trapped surplus, if you remember the mantra is spend less than you earn, invest the surplus and wait. Well, that's where the Armchair Guidebook comes in, folks. So there's free resources. And in February, we're going to give you some more free resources around suburbs. So folks, this is the place to be. We are planning for 2024 to be the best year yet on this podcast, folks. So stick around. We've got lots planned. And I can promise you there's lots planned in the More platform. So get in there, start using it, start trapping the surplus, start seeing your insights, and I promise you, folks, I've been pressing to Ben and the team about something that we're cooking up to help property investors in that more platform. So you want to make sure that you know how to use that platform when we get to announce what's coming later on in this year around how we can help property investors with that platform. So folks, now is the right time. So Ben, it's always a pleasure hanging out with folks like James around summer series. We've got a couple more to go before we round out January and move into February, mate. But until next week.
Knowledge is empowering, Bryce, but only if you act on it.
See you next week, folks.